Yes.
Tonight we are on part 2 of Sacred Sexuality with licensed marriage therapist, sex therapist Julie Elizabeth. And we're so excited to have her speaking tonight and going a little bit deeper into the subject she introduced us to a couple weeks ago. Thank you for your time and your willingness to come back and teach us more. And I'm really excited to just turn the time over to you and get going.
Perfect. Thank you for that introduction, and for everybody who is here on the call tonight. I so appreciate your time and your willingness to come with an open heart and open mind. This is one of my favorite topics of all time. It's hard to get me to stop talking about it, so I'm thrilled to be here. Today, I want to just build on what we talked about last time. Anybody that's joining here that wasn't able to catch the recording last time or wasn't able to be here last time, just kind of a recap. Last time we covered the what, the why, and the how of sacred sexuality. So just a quick recap of that. Sacred sexuality is redefining and reclaiming sexuality, or our sexual essence, as a life force energy, as a spiritual practice, in the same way that we engage with sound healing or different vibrations and raising our frequency. Sexuality is no different than that. It's just another dimension of it. So when I think about sexual health and intimacy, that's the frame that I often view it through. And looking at it from a wellness perspective versus an illness perspective. So that's kind of what I'm rooted in. And today I wanted to focus a lot on what sacred union looks like, what some of the fundamentals are, what some of the practices are, so that you can have not only the perspective of how do we look at our sexuality, how do we engage with our sexuality, but how do we really cultivate that beautiful sacred space between lovers, and to co-create an energetic synergy where that energy can fully move and flow through. So I do want to acknowledge, anytime I talk about this topic, I want to acknowledge that it can be really sensitive in nature. And I just want to hold space for that and honor that if there are any raw spots or vulnerabilities that come up, I invite you to please take care of yourself. Take a moment to ground. Anybody that's not familiar with that term, grounded can just look like supporting your nervous system by taking more intentional, deep breaths, maybe feeling your feet on the floor. If you need to maybe turn your camera off or leave it on, it doesn't matter. You can kind of get up and start to just shake your body. That can really help to just reset your nervous.
Julie, can you unmute? Sorry for that technical problem.
Yep, no problem.
But it is a quick opportunity for me to say what I want to make sure people didn't miss in the chat. If you want to be confidential in this and you do not want anyone in the public to see your face or your name, please turn your camera off, and you can change your name by going to the participants box and hitting the 3 dots next to your name, and you can change your name. But these recordings are available to the public. And so I just wanted to have that shared up front so that you can feel free and comfortable asking any questions tonight. And I wanted you to be aware. If you need help, message me in the chat on how to turn things off. Okay, can we hear you now, Julie? I'm so sorry about that. I was trying to mute someone else and I muted you. So let's try again.
No problem. Can you still hear me and see me okay? Okay, awesome. So, like many things when it comes to healing and spiritual evolution, I want to start off with this discussion around sacred union by really emphasizing the importance of knowing yourself and being fully connected to your own sexual essence, your own sexual expression, and taking the time to educate yourself not only about your own anatomy and body, but an exploration of what works for you and what doesn't work for you, because it's such a personal and unique journey to understand something as complex and beautiful as your unique sexual expression. And so I can't emphasize enough the value of taking the time to know yourself and to cultivate intimacy and this concept of sacred union within. I wrote and published a book called Sacred Sexuality Within and Between. And I use that term so often. Any of my clients, anyone I work with, they probably get so sick of it. It's like a broken record, but I always say everything happens within and between, because we don't exist in a vacuum. So of course our context matters. Of course our relationships are significant and important, but really this intimacy that's cultivated within ourselves is going to have a ripple effect across every context of our lives. And so why would it be any different when it comes to sexuality? This was such a huge, profound concept for me in my own sexual journey and development, because there was a significant period of time that I felt it wasn't accessible to me. Being able to relate to my own sexuality and to my own body, and to just explore that sexual expression, that sexual essence, it felt really inaccessible because of a lot of shame that I had, and also just cultural conditioning that taught me that it was wrong or bad or embarrassing or off limits, right? So for a long time, I felt kind of powerless and subject to, well, I'm not going to have fulfilling sexual intimacy and or pleasurable sexual experiences unless I have a partner that can give that to me, unless I have a partner that can do that for me or do that with me. And man, being single sucked. It super sucked when I didn't have the tools or the awareness or the ability to fully cultivate that intimacy with myself. And so that's where I want to start tonight, is just examining what that can look like and the fundamentals of that. And so much of it starts with awareness, bringing awareness to the things that we've been taught, the things that you were taught around sexuality, about your own body. Oh, was there a question here? Okay, thought I heard something. So cultivating that sense of intimacy within yourself, it starts with examining any beliefs that you have that have been taught to you or that you've maybe accepted as true that make that feel inaccessible, right? What have I been taught about my body? What have I been taught about pleasure? What have I been taught about sexuality in general and the context where it's appropriate or not appropriate? And just looking at what are they, right? Without judgment, just kind of noticing what those beliefs are, and then getting curious about how they make you feel. And something that I've learned is that the beliefs that don't serve me, the beliefs that don't resonate as true, often contribute to shame or contraction in my body or heaviness or density. And so it's just bringing curiosity to that place and understanding, what are the things that really create blockages or barriers between myself and myself. Um, and from there, you can really set intentions. We talked last time a lot about the power of intentions and how intentions are really everything. It makes a difference between just going through the motions or going through our routines of life. I could give you a set of practices and you can do it, but without intention, without substance, without that energetic presence, without the quality of the emotion behind it, it can fall flat a lot of the time. And so whenever we're doing this process within ourselves, this exploration of what are my beliefs, what is my relationship to myself, I think having that intention of maybe seeking truth can be a simple intention, right? I just want to see what resonates as true in my body. I know, Angel, you're really big on that. That's something you talk about a lot, is tuning into the frequency of truth and identifying anything that doesn't resonate with that. What serves love, right? What serves divine, genuine love for myself, with myself? What's true about myself? So just maybe inviting, I know last time we talked a lot about experiential learning. So I want to maybe introduce some concepts to you, some different ways of viewing this, but then take you into a practice of trying it on for yourself. And this can be as simple as, if everybody's willing to just take a moment, slow down, and take your awareness into your body. I always like placing a hand, kind of like an anchor point or grounding point. I always like placing one right on my chest here. And then I place another one on my belly here. And And we're just going to start to breathe and become aware of our breath. Maybe taking a nice deeper inhale and letting it all go with your exhale. See if you can find any pleasure or any relief in the exhale. So as you breathe in, take a nice deeper breath. And then with your exhale, see if you can find any pleasure in the way that you exhale it. And just as an exercise, this is all about self-discovery, curiosity, and awareness. If we can just do a little scan of your body to notice how you feel in this very moment, any sensations that are present, and breathe with that. I wonder what it's like to just engage with this topic. With some of the concepts I've already discussed, I wonder what it's like for you to just look at those things and consider the idea of intimacy with yourself. Just notice what shows up in your body. Notice what sensations show up. Maybe it's excitement. Maybe it feels a little bit scary. Maybe it feels vulnerable, new. Just breathe with that sensation. And then maybe let's add an intention. If you can bring awareness to your hands and where they're touching your body, can we pair an intention with just holding? Notice how I invited you to place your hands, if you were willing, to place your hands on your body. Maybe you could go through the motions before, but now can we add an intention to our hands of holding and honoring the vessel that is this physical body that contains your consciousness, your soul, the essence of you? Can we hold it with devotion, gratitude, tenderness? I wonder if we could get curious about anything that it might desire right now. What does that word mean to you, desire? How do you define the word desire? Just take notice. I want to speak something to a really common response. I don't know. And I want to make it okay for that response to show up. It's okay to not know. Just stay present with that. Take another deep breath in. And let it go. When you're ready, I'm going to invite you to open your eyes. And just take notice. If anybody has a journal with you, sometimes it's nice to just kind of write down anything that you noticed, anything you became aware of, any questions you want to come back to. Just take a moment to do that. As I explain why there's power in I don't know. We don't need to be afraid of I don't know. For myself, when it shows up, I think the knee-jerk response is contraction, freeze. Oh no, I don't know. Right? I think there's a conditioned response that I can get afraid, or I can have fear around I don't know. I don't know what I want. I don't know what I need. I don't know what I desire. I don't know what I'm doing. Just notice how that feels. And then maybe consider changing our relationship to that and allowing it to be, I get to discover. Thank God I don't have all the answers to everything. I get to discover what my body enjoys. I get to stay in curiosity and in awe of what can I try? What can I experiment with? Right? If we don't have to have a right or wrong answer, then we get to explore and discover. So I just want to maybe offer that as a tool for the how to cultivate intimacy with yourself is giving yourself permission to not know and make that be okay. Many people don't even know the names for their anatomy because they were never taught. It's not their fault. It's okay. We just get to learn. We just get to discover. We get to explore. And we get to name it for ourselves. And you get to make it all up for yourself. So I want to just offer that as a tool to cultivate this intimacy with yourself. First, to know your body. And then I want to present why this is so significant in the context of sacred union when it comes to a lover or a beloved or a partner. Okay. I love visuals. And so I often use a Venn diagram to depict this within and between process that I'm talking about. And why I love the Venn diagram is because I get to focus on that whole circle and what I'm bringing into the union, what I'm bringing into the dynamic, right? So there's so many things that just come within knowing myself and my own circle, knowing what are my attachment style and patterns. How does that show up in a sexual context? Because it does, right? It's not that crazy of a jump to consider that our emotional dynamics that play out when it comes to love and connection and intimacy with our hearts is going to definitely show up in its own way in the bedroom and in our intimate encounters when we're kind of being the most vulnerable, right? And just knowing that and knowing what we need. So there's a whole realm of discovery around just attachment. How do we create more security in that? And another thing I want to mention as far as kind of knowing yourself and what you're bringing into this dynamic is, especially as it pertains to sexuality, is that it's not an on or off switch. It's not just like, oh, I'm a sexual person or I'm not a sexual person. I have a sex drive or I don't have a sex drive. It often presents more as accelerators and brakes. It's a dual control model. I think I may have touched on this a bit last time or mentioned it, but I want to go more in depth here because it pertains so much to the context. Context matters so much when it comes to creating a space for intimacy. And some people can get so fixated on maybe I have lower desire than my partner, or I struggle more, I have more blocks around accessing my arousal or accessing my desire. Maybe there's something wrong with me. There's all these kinds of stories that we can get caught up in and all these kinds of fears when it comes to difficulties with how our sexual experiences are. But I find it so empowering to learn that it's like gas pedals and brakes. Because when we know ourselves, then we can identify what we need, and then we can ask for what we want, and then we can create a context that is green lights. Green means go. Yes? So when it comes to my gas pedals and my brakes, or accelerators and brakes, it's not just about focusing all on what are the things that are going to turn me on and how do I figure out what's going to turn me on. It's also really understanding what is blocking me, what's getting in the way. And these aren't just physical things, right? Like, oh, a bad smell or a distracting sound or something like that. Breaks can be beliefs, like I mentioned before. Breaks can be insecurities. Breaks can be past experiences. Breaks can be stress in the body. Breaks can, there's so many different types of breaks that when I can understand what those are, I can invite my partner to help me, and I can understand for myself, what do I need to disengage the break, right? So I need to disengage the break and understand what is going to make it accelerate. Does that make sense? Does anybody have questions about this just so far? Just so we can just check in, because I know I've been sharing a lot of information.
can I share? And then you tell me if this is what you're talking about, you know, in moments like that, knowing how to put on the brakes. But um, my husband, Eric, and we are a second marriage. He's my second husband. So having been married for 16 years with one partner and then shifting into a new relationship just in the last 5 years, you know, there are differences. And when the first relationship ended in divorce, there was a lot of difficulty and pain and sadness. And so in a moment of being with Eric, who I love and I'm attracted to and I want to be with him, there was a time when I just noticed like a total shift. Like while we were being intimate, like all of a sudden where I just got nervous and wanted to turn away. And in that moment, my mind is like, no, you're supposed to, you should, you want to, you love him. But my body was telling me, I don't feel safe. And being able to have the awareness that I have now, which didn't exist in my first marriage, being able to put on the brakes without shame or without fear,
Yeah.
but honoring myself and being like, hold up, can we hang on a second? I said, I need to feel for a moment. I don't know what this is, but can we just pause for a second? Then I just came home to myself. What am I feeling? And it was just sadness. And I don't know why, but I'm feeling sadness. And then telling him what I could use in that moment. Can you just hold me for a moment? And just crying. Now, this is new. And now I understand this is one of the most intimate moments you could ever have, is when your connection with your partner is more to do with actually connecting on the soul level, on the mind, the emotions, and the body. It's not just having physical intercourse. And it was an opportunity that allowed him to be tender and present, very present and in touch with me. And just while I cried and he held me, I still was like, I don't even know what this is about. And he just said, it's okay. You don't have to know. You don't have to know. And so he didn't have to fix it. I didn't have to know. But it was such a beautiful moment. And ever since then, we've been able to base that relationship on it being okay for whatever you're experiencing to be spoken of. And that's totally different. My experience in the past, and I'm guessing, since I've counseled many women, that you would know about this, others on the call, when something uncomfortable or awkward came up with me in my first marriage, I would just dissociate. How many of you know that word? I would just dissociate. It's like the most common thing a woman does. Like she goes to her safe place in her mind. So her body stays there engaged in the act. And in her mind, I'm at the beach in Hawaii, or I'm at Costco doing my shopping list, or I'm reading a book. Like I did that, my friends, 100% of the time for 16 years after our wedding night. I'm telling you that I mastered the art of dissociation and I did not realize that was a problem. So anyway, enough about me, but I just turn the time back over to Julie to see if like brakes and accelerator. I hope that had something to do with what you were talking about.
It's perfect. And it's a perfect segue. Like, of course, right? Like that's a perfect example of what some of these principles I'm talking about. Like it grounds it in what it looks like in real life. Right? And you're bringing awareness and curiosity to yourself. That's everything I'm talking about. Right? Oh, I'm noticing my pattern of disconnecting, or I'm noticing my pattern of contracting and wanting to go away, or I'm noticing how we both responded to emotion when it showed up. Right? Like in the example I gave, oh, what is my relationship to the word desire? Like, what do I even want? There's so much to be uncovered. So I love your example. Thank you so much for sharing it. And it's exactly what I'm talking about, with knowing yourself and then bringing it into that context to understand what's the break that showed up. Breaks are not bad. Breaks are necessary, actually. If we're only pressing the gas all the time, like we miss so much beauty. We miss so much opportunity. So that's a prime example of how breaks actually have some of the sweetest gifts, some of the most potent healing and transformation and intimacy that you can experience. So that's a perfect example. And so I want to talk about some of the other principles that you mentioned. Great segue. I'm trying to be aware of time. Again, I can go off on like so many tangents. So if you notice me doing that, please like center me back. Okay. I just get so excited to share all of the things. So knowing yourself in that Venn diagram, of here's where I'm at with my sexual journey, here's where I'm at with my body, here's where I'm at with my understanding of my own gas pedals and my own brakes, and here's a whole big category of I don't know. And that is beautiful and okay and awesome because we get to discover. And then in a partnership, you get to discover together. You get to create a context that is going to be supportive and nurturing of sacred sexuality and sacred union, which is why we're all here to learn about, right? So I want to get into that, some of the principles you just mentioned, Angel. The biggest one that comes to my mind is presence, which is the opposite of dissociation, right? Dissociation is disconnecting from the moment. The mind goes elsewhere. You're going to a beach somewhere in your mind, right? And your body is still here. So anytime there's that disconnection, we want to call for a pause because we can't proceed without presence. Intimacy only exists and only happens in the present moment. If we're not both fully there, we're not connecting, right? We have to be fully there. And a concept that I love that I think goes really hand in hand with this know yourself and bring that to the context of the between is from a tantric philosophy, having one eye inward and one eye outward. So I am aware of myself, what I'm feeling, what I'm experiencing, what I'm needing, what I'm wanting, how I'm expressing, and I'm aware of my partner and what I'm noticing and feeling from them, what I'm observing, what I'm maybe inviting, or what kind of pleasure I'm trying to create for them. And it's a practice, it's a muscle in and of itself to have that one eye inward and one eye outward. And not only is that important to make sure we're not dissociating, but it's important for both partners to be doing that so that we preserve safety. Intimacy is not going to exist without safety either. So we need presence and we need safety because those things build trust. We need consistency, we need stability to build that trust to continue deepening into vulnerability, deepening into intimacy and into risk taking. If I take a risk and nothing's there to catch me and I get all bruised up, how likely is it going to be them take a risk like that again or even a bigger risk? Right? It requires vulnerability and safety for both of those people. So these are some of the principles. And when we can bring that presence and of awareness, we can set an intention to that container that we're building. What kind of intention? So I wanted to ask this maybe as a journal prompt. I use this word a lot because we're talking about sacred sexuality, and it's a kind of a buzzword to say sacred all the time. What does sacred union mean? What does that look like to you? Does it have to be all like serious and oh gosh, the words that come up in mind are like there's like purity culture, right? Like sacred has to represent clean or has to represent like good girl or good boy.
Reverent.
Reverence. Yeah. Like what does sacred union actually mean? And I'd be curious, maybe can we open up a little discussion? Can we ask? Yes, Roger.
Perfect topic, subject. Because we did the Energy Healers Conference day before yesterday. And let's see, yeah, Dr. Nilsson brought in his emotion code information. And we went through something and it actually touched on one of the most important parts, I think, to being able to be present in a relationship, which is part of the sacred or higher, I'm going to say, sexuality. This is not hormonal based alone. It isn't. It isn't to put another notch in your lipstick case, as some songs might say, or another notch in your pistol, or whatever. It's about union, and that is a communication skill. Now, what Dr. Bradley Nelson talked about was, and he hit a nerve with me, because I'm a spiritualist. I'm a spiritual teacher and coach, but there was one thing that people get stuck on, even after they've worked their blockages around the heart and stuff. And that was the inculcated dogma of our past. A spiritual person, you have to give up everything. And I go, what? Because I don't buy that, but I found that at some point in my early life, that was pushed into me as a traumatic hurt or a knowing that
Yeah.
I had to actually be willing to accept that I think that, I have this hang up about giving up the fact that I love the divine feminine and the divine me as we are. And I had to come back into this aspect of trusting myself to communicate that in a spiritual, but maybe I'll say agnostic way, because the dogma was a mistake.
Yeah.
It was a way of controlling us. And so I wondered if you want to elaborate on that, Julie. That's big subject.
Elaborate on overcoming the dogma, you mean?
Yeah, or feeling like, yeah, you can't be spiritual, which I think is part of higher and higher sexual behavior. You can't do that and still have a good sex life. And I'm quite certain that that's not correct, but maybe you have some more insight.
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. Another great segue, and why I asked this prompt in the first place of how do we define sacred outside of purity culture? Because I think purity culture can come with a lot of that shame and rigidity and repression around our sexual expression, right? It's like there isn't any space for sex and God, whatever divine, right? Like whatever to exist together. And even then, maybe only certain expressions of my sexuality are welcome, right? Only certain dimensions of my sexual being can be worthy of being considered divine or worthy of love or acceptance. And I have found the most profound healing and transformation and truth have come in some of the darkest, kinkiest places and bringing light to those places, bringing acceptance and love and creativity and pleasure and fun, as long as there's integrity. And so I want to talk about that concept of integrity. And when we can be fully present, right? If I have one eye inward and one eye outward, and part of my intentions for this sacred space is that we preserve the safety of all beings. If I express a part of myself and my partner is dissociating, well, we need to pause because then there's no longer safety, right? Like we're no longer both present. And it's both of our responsibility to co-create that space. But if we consent fully, if we're both knowing ourself, if we're both connected to ourself and not disconnecting from ourself to only focus on the other, right? Abandoning self. If that's all consensual, what can we create when we bring in these different elements of ourself and use creative expression and sexual expression for alchemy, right? It's the process of experience, I think, that can bring so much truth when we just allow ourselves to take some of those risks and go there and get curious about that, right? Like your very question of how can we overcome it? I would say this is how, is practicing it and having these conscious conversations with your lover and being like, I have this part of myself that exists and I really would like to view it as holy. I would really like to view it as sacred, but it's one that I carry a lot of shame around. What would it be like to have that kind of a conversation and be like, I do have this secret desire. I would like to play with it. I would like to maybe explore what that looks like and find love in those places. Does that answer your question, Roger? Curiosity is an element that banishes shame. Yes, absolutely. And I would also say there's a lot about, I did my my workshop at Yen on Fire, I talked a lot about shame resilience and applying that to the sexual context. Shame resilience from Brene Brown's work and the recipe for shame resilience, which is essentially having that critical awareness and looking at it with like fine-tooth comb, like where did some of this shame come from? Where is this rooted in? And then speaking about our shame in affirming spaces. What's a more affirming space than the person that you can be your most vulnerable, true, authentic self and be like, yeah, I have a part of me that self-sabotages, or I have a part of me that does XYZ, right? Like I'm an imperfect, flawed human, and I'm practicing the art of relating with you, right? Like that's such an opportunity for this affirming space to bring light to the shadows. And so I want to maybe ask some other questions just for kind of thought provoking. When we're setting intentions for creating this context, creating this space, this isn't, it doesn't have to be all serious, but I think being intentional is very powerful. And so if we're setting intention that this is going to be a sacred space for healing, for radical acceptance of ourselves, radical acceptance of our partner, for curiosity and play, for risk-taking and exploration, it's going to be a space of trust. It's going to be a space of safety. It's going to be a space of presence that we're inviting in divine love to express through our bodies. Okay, we have a framework, right? So if we're setting that kind of intention of creating a space that is a sacred space for this sexuality to express, my questions are, what does that mean to you? What would an intentional space look and feel like in the tangible, in the tangible reality? Is it spontaneous and opportunistic, or like, can there be a space that we set up like any other ritual? Right? Can I have a designated area that's going to be free of distractions? What is in service of helping me be fully present? What is in service of helping my body feel safe? What is in service of these intentions? How can I create an intentional space? Time can be a huge one, right? Can we set aside the time, carve out the time that we're not going to be interrupted? And then part of that framework is boundaries and consent. This is a really, 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 really important one that I can't skip over. I have to emphasize it because this is part of taking radical responsibility, which is another concept of practicing sacred union and sacred sexuality, is both partners taking radical responsibility for this container, for this exchange, for this interaction, for the quality and substance of your sexual expression, right? You get to co-create it, you get to dictate it. And so if you can both take radical responsibility of, it is my job to be the authority of my own body. It's my job to speak my own boundaries, to say no when my body is saying no, and to be honest and transparent about that. This is not a place of convenience or peacekeeping or people pleasing. Those are dangerous. Dangerous for the container. Because it can sacrifice that safety. It can sacrifice that trust. It does not feel good. I don't know if you've ever experienced this. If someone says yes, but they actually mean no, and you can just feel the tension. Right? I mentioned in my book too, and maybe I said this last time, but I think it's worth repeating that one of the sexiest things a partner has said to me is that I can't trust your yes until I've heard your no. And so that practice in and of itself, I think, is part of the how. How do we practice like asking for something and then just saying no? Do we have that skill in our relationship? Have that conscious conversation with your partner. How do you feel saying no to me? Are there any fears that come up for you with saying no? Do you feel any obligation or pressure? If so, where does that come from? And how do I contribute to it? How can I create more space with you that we can both say no, that we can both really be fully honest with each other? Get curious, have these conversations.
There's so many questions I have.
Okay, perfect. But I was gonna say, do we want to pause here?
Yeah, let's have some, and I want other people to be able to ask and share what is on their mind, because there is a lot we could cover. And having worked with you, Julie, and knowing your depths and your experience, like we want to get to some of the nitty gritty stuff, but I
know.
was just thinking of asking ourselves, what is our goal or reason for having sex? That was crossing my mind because it's different, right? And two partners actually often have different goals or reasons for having sex. And this is one of the least communicated pieces that I've seen. And so if you have different goals, why is it so difficult to connect, you know? And so being clear, do you guys ever ask yourself, like, what is my goal for having sex? We think that what we want is what our partner wants too, because it makes sense to us, and it's not. But then adding to that, if I'm clear on what my goal is, like for me, it's connection and trust and safety and security and all this kind of stuff. Then I can add what she was saying is what would serve this purpose. So I first have to know my target. What is my goal? Like, is it playful? Is it just fun? Is it a quickie at lunch? You know, like, let's be clear. All of these are great, and there's a time and a place, you know? Is it angry sex? That's one of my favorite. Come here, big guy, and let me just beat the shit out of you. Eric's gonna love that I shared that. He doesn't care what my goal is. He's just glad that he gets it. But anyway, asking ourselves what the goal is and then intentionally setting up the environment for that purpose. And some people have said to me, like, oh my gosh, it sounds like it takes so much work. And those are people who have a scrappy sex life, because this is like an orchestra. And if you want great intimacy, why wouldn't you put time and effort into it as much as you put into making a meal or like doing a job at work? You put so much time and effort into these other places. That was my 2 cents there, but it was more like 75 cents. Any other comments with where we're at? They can just be random. You do not have to be on topic. Whatever's coming through you, please.
I love the silence too. Just taking a moment. This is practicing what we're talking about. This is practicing what we preach. Just taking moments to pause and integrate. Notice how you feel, what's coming up for you. Is this conversation edgy? Is this conversation stimulating? Anything that's coming up for you is perfect. I get excited about this conversation because of all of the dimensions of what's possible. And like Angel said, there's so much, there's so many nitty gritties that I just want to I just want to share them all with you. And I can't get to those things without setting the stage and creating the context and contain. Like this very conversation is about the fundamentals. These are just the fundamentals of sacred union. There's so much more that gets to be explored when we take the time to set up the framework. Within and between. If I'm in partnership, am I taking the time to check in with myself too? Do I have a self pleasure, a solo sex practice? Do I cultivate intimacy with myself? Can I invite my partner into my inner world? What is the relationship I have to myself? Because it will show up in the context of my relationship and how I approach my partner. For many men, a very common pattern is rushing. And it's to no fault of their own, both culturally and physically. Testosterone is a beast, right? It's like, we're ready to go. It's easy to get to that fun quickie. I think some of the challenge is slowing it down. Some of the challenge is finding pleasure in the journey and savoring the build and kind of celebrating the slowness that's possible. Like, how much more pleasure can you experience if we don't go that fast, right? Timing. And for many women, I think sometimes it's very difficult to be like, I'm taking too long. And so then I freeze up and I feel like that makes me wrong or bad. And it can totally be reversed too. I'm just speaking to some commonalities. So I appreciate you making that comment, because it is absolutely true. Whichever partner is that like trying to go that fast, it speaks to the component of presence, right? We both have to be present in a moment. And if my partner is moving faster than I can stay present with, if they're moving faster than I can keep up with, it disrupts the connection. Does that make sense? We have to move at a pace where there's synergy. If it's a fast pace, fantastic. If it needs to be a slow pace, whatever is in service of, like whatever's in service of the intentions there. If the intention is genuinely intimacy and connection to self and other, if it's pleasure, we need to be able to be present. So whatever pacing, whatever timing that is, that we are both here, we're both connected to ourselves and each other, that's the pace at which we move. And it can fluctuate just for the fun of it. Sometimes it's really fun to just play with that alone. We're going to move really slow now and see how much tension we can build with the energy, with the potency of our presence, right? We're just going to breathe. Tension can be beautiful, such a great tool. And other times it's going to be passionate, fast, and all in one sexual encounter. Right? These are all things we get to play with as long as we have that attunement. Because what we're talking about here is sacred union. So I'm assuming that we're all here to learn about really high quality, extraordinary sex in sacred union with a partner. The more attuned I am to my body, the more capable I am of recognizing those cues, recognizing the energy, being highly sensitive to any nuances and feeling my partner's energy. Right? If I'm totally disconnected from my body, it's going to be harder for me to do that. Did someone have a comment?
Roger had a question. He said, you mentioned sexual alchemy. That's a big subject. Please elaborate. What does that mean?
Mm. Mm-hmm. I love this question. I took some notes on it in preparation for this call. And I think the way that I'd like to talk about it is, can we make space to feel all of our emotions and express all of our emotions in this setting, right? Like Angel said before, tears don't have to be a bad thing. I think sometimes we associate it with something being wrong. But I've had tears streaming down my face because I'm in complete awe of the beauty of what's happening and of how much is releasing from my body. And I've never experienced this kind of love and this kind of being seen and being held and feeling safe. I've never experienced that before in my life. And my body just naturally releases anything it's been holding on to because I'm receiving something so pure and so beautiful and so high vibrational that my body can't help but release. And in those moments, I've had my partner slow down with me and be so present, kissing the tears that are rolling down my cheeks. And just honoring and having reverence for what's happening. And so if I have a raw spot from my past, or I have something that I'm ashamed of, another example would be body insecurity. I'm just having a day where maybe I'm struggling with body insecurity. And I support women. I empower women to feel so good with their bodies, no matter what shape, size, or stage they're in. And I still experience body insecurity sometimes. It's just a human thing. I think everybody experiences that to some degree, men, women, and anybody. And so there was a day I was experiencing that and just feeling that kind of shame, feeling that kind of contraction. And it was an opportunity. This is alchemy, right? Like we can bring our pain, we can bring our raw spots, we can bring our wounds to this sacred space, to this altar, if you will. And my partner just began to worship my body in gentle kisses and caresses and like just started massaging my calf and my thighs and right, like just really honor and worship my whole body. It was my opportunity to decide, am I going to open to receive this right now? Am I going to surrender that pain to this altar space? Am I going to surrender it to this process of alchemy that's happening? Am I going to allow myself to fully feel it and be with it, but bring radical acceptance to that dark part in myself? Or am I going to just contract and hold the tension and resist and and endure it until it's over. But do you see how I'm an active participant? My partner is there giving me this gift. And I get to choose how deeply I am able to feel in the context of the space. It's not just can I bear myself soul open in this moment, but just by choice, like there needs to be that degree of safety. Does that make sense that safety is co-created? It's essential that safety has to be co-created. If I'm with a partner that's going to judge my tears, am I going to feel safe to cry and like disrupt the connection? Like, oh, it's just such a beautiful opportunity. And those are just little examples, right? Those are kind of those feel like PG examples of the sexual alchemy that's possible, right? Body insecurity is easy to talk about. It's easy to name. Or how much love I'm receiving when I've not felt worthy of love. That's easy to name. But things that I have maybe not felt good with, like the sexual shadow, for example, maybe the part of me that wants to be selfish. As a woman, that can be really challenging, that I want it to be all about me. Maybe I don't want it to be about my partner. Maybe I don't want to be a generous lover in this moment. Maybe I want to just really embrace the fact that I want it to be all about me. Can I be selfish, and can we make that kinky and fun, and can there be consent in that moment? Can I embrace and integrate that part of myself? Or my primal, I think for, you mentioned this in your comment, Roger. Sometimes it's because of dogma, or sometimes because it's like we feel like maybe we can't be spiritual if we're sexual. And I think in this world, something I want to speak to, especially around safety, is that it can feel scary to embrace the fullness of our power as sexual beings, almost like developing that trust within ourselves to really connect to that desire and let that desire express and to manifest. And I can tell you that I feel the safest as a woman. I feel the safest when I'm with a male partner who has connected to his sexual power, has befriended it, and fully lets it move through him, almost like a power that's going to protect the space, right? That like he's going to be so fiercely connected to that power that it's going to serve the space. I feel way safer interacting with a lover that does that versus a lover that that doesn't want it to be about them ever. Because then there's a part of their sexuality that maybe hasn't been integrated that can show up in shadowy ways. Are there questions about that? I want to make sure I'm really clear when I'm talking about these principles because they're so important.
Well, I think one of the best examples of sexual alchemy is that we know that people who have a healthy sexual life in their relationship, whether it's marriage or another type of union, connection, they're going to live longer. They're going to have a happier countenance. They're going to create things that are magical for each other.
Mhm.
And that's art of co-creation, which I believe sexuality actually is.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. Angel, do you want to speak that question?
Yeah, I just feel it. Somebody wanted me to ask, so they just channel it on over here. And it was, how do you even recognize or admit your sexual shadow? How do you get that out of your denial or blind spot? Like you were saying this, I want it to be this way. Like most of us live, in my experience, live in our mind that is about shoulds and have tos. Like we can't even admit or feel this is the way I want it. It's like, no, that's not how it is. Like the woman's role is this, the man's role is this. Like, I don't know if you have any experience in coaching people on how to open up and accept themselves, accept what they think, what they feel, accept desires and not instantly judge them. That's probably the first thing is I want to say to clarify is that we judge our sexual thoughts so quickly that it's like we shut a door on it. And then how can you even connect or talk to your partner or even experience things when it's like, boom, judgment. So recognizing, ooh, I judged that.
Mhm.
So I think I just answered the question in part, is start
Totally.
recognizing what you're judging. Why are you afraid to say that? Do you have any other thoughts on how do you find your shadow?
Yeah, I think it's a awareness and practice, right? Like become aware of the ways that you're maybe shutting down parts of yourself or judging parts of yourself, and then get curious about those places. I think it also comes with the freedom of expression, right? Like I think sometimes you stumble upon it when you're in one of these encounters, one of these spaces. And I've discovered it that way myself when I'm just like allowing my body to lead and I'm giving permission to myself to express in whatever is natural, right? Like in the moment, I'm letting sounds come out. I'm just trusting my body to kind of move how it wants to move. And I've sometimes stumbled upon things like all of a sudden this thought or this expression will come through and I'm like, what was that? And why did it turn me on? It's like I didn't even know that was there. But I love what you're saying as far as shadow. It's the things that we have shame around that we can examine and look at, the things that we judge as wrong or bad, and the things that often sometimes scare us that we can just examine and look at and get curious about.
I have a couple examples of working with people that have been helpful for others, so I would love to share. One woman came in to see me and she was just beside herself, so mad that her husband masturbates. She discovered it, that he's been masturbating. I have 5 sons, so I want you to know I kept a poker face on while this client was telling me this. I was just like, I even have an ultrasound picture when I was expecting one of the boys. You know what they said? It's a boy because he was holding his penis in the ultrasound. So it starts that young and that innocent. Like classic. I'm saving this photo for him for when he's 18. I'll give it to him on his birthday. Like nothing to be ashamed of, son. It's a lifelong hobby. Anyway, so she's so mad. Like I found the lotion out and I found this on his phone or whatever. She's going through this whole thing. And I'm in that moment going inward and upward, asking the divine, how do I reach her? How do I teach truth? And this thought came through in that moment and it never before to explain to her. So I said, okay, can we pause for a moment? And I asked her, have you ever nursed babies? You're a mom, you've had several kids. Yeah, you've breastfed babies. Okay. So in between feedings, can you tell me what it feels like in your body to go to have the time lapse between feedings and to how do you know that you need to feed them? She's like, oh my gosh, my breasts get engorged, they start to hurt, they throb. Okay, in those moments, how easy is it for you to just like turn it off and go think about something else and just leave it alone? She's like, no, like either I need my baby or I get a pump if my baby's not around, or you have to manually express it. So I got her really engaged as like, okay, keep talking about this, as to why, just and how natural that is in her body. And I said, now imagine if I were to come in and confront you about how disgusting, and I can't believe that you are pumping and expressing milk from your own body and to relieve tension of any kind. And then she was like, I said, now can we talk about the male anatomy for a moment? And we talked through in more depth and she's like, I'm going to go home and apologize to my husband. So that was one thing. I mean, I hope it's clear. I don't have a male anatomy, but there are times from conversations I've had with others that there is just a pressure that sometimes it's not really about great sex or anything, but there's just this need to release pressure. Yay or nay? Am I on target at all, men in the room? Maybe I'm just making this shit up. Okay, there's a few thumbs up. I really hope that doesn't get put into the reels for the social media. They just automatically, AI just edits these shows and like puts these blurbs up and be like, oh, there's Angel. Okay. So that was one. And then the other one is just talking about to clients about, again, with the fear of masturbating, either themselves, self-pleasuring or solo sex. It's like, we've been so shamed to touch our body. So another time I'm like, Spirit, show me the truth and how to teach this person to move through the shame. And the Spirit told me to say this. What are your favorite things to eat? What do you love to taste? And they start telling me the chocolate and strawberries. And so I'm like, why? Why do you prefer that over this? And they're like, da, da, da. They tell me. And I said, because your taste buds, right? You have taste buds. And when you put food in your mouth, there's pleasure. And so I'm getting them to describe all of this pleasure from eating. And I said, what if I walked in and saw you feeding yourself and told you, stop it right now. That is disgusting. You are not allowed to feed yourself. That is for your partner to do only. You need to wait and not eat until your partner is home and puts that strawberry in your mouth. And she was like, what? And I was like, why is the rule different for the southern hemisphere of our body? If we're totally fine, like I can brush my hair because it feels good, I can get massage, I can feed myself, but if I touch myself, I'm going to hell right now. That programming. So that was just another way that I was challenging. Spirit was helping me to challenge the boundaries and rules that people have put on what is okay for me to do with my own body, and telling us not to touch it. And that's another soapbox for another day. But those are some points that I wanted to share to help people. It opened my mind, and it's opened other people's mind to be like, oh, let me get curious and challenge the way I've been programmed and conditioned. And the last one is just many, many men that just feel like they're so gross for masturbating. I've asked them, who designed you? Who or what designed you? And they give me, whether it's God or the creation or the universe, and I'll just take it to nature, and have them, okay, if you were designed by this source, then, and it's natural, and you have these natural desires and even the plumbing for it, like your body functions in this way, how could that be bad and wrong? Like, who or what taught you that it was bad and wrong? And it always comes back to a human who carries their own fear, guilt, shame, and judgment. They passed it on. There's nothing in nature, in the natural world, that says, here's how you were divinely designed. Now go be ashamed of it. And so the last part of that is, I'm like, when you get a desire or even the urge to masturbate, what if you ask your higher power, your source of truth, to be with you in that moment? So imagine that I say this to you. Ask God to be with you while you masturbate. Do you know the reaction I get from people? Just guess from a purity culture. Oh my gosh, are you kidding? And I'm like, do you think he doesn't know, when I'm working within their framework and I use the word he? Do you think that this God that you believe in doesn't know you're doing it? So the only thing you're doing is thinking that you're hiding. But anyway, to go into it a little more is bring that spirit in. When I have brought that spirit of truth into my intimate spaces and said, Spirit, show me what is true. You designed me. You made this. What is really true and possible? What is the power here? What is the possibility here? What is this I'm experiencing? And what more is there? Those are some of the most sacred, going back to that word, sacred conversations I've ever had. And it was only through having that personal experience during solo sex time that then I was able to take those same skills into an intimate moment with my partner and ask the divine the same questions. Teach me about the divine engineering of his body. I'll bet there are things he doesn't even know. And the spirit can enlighten me, because the spirit has the great blueprint, and share with me and guide me on ways to connect and serve my partner. Not from a book, not from even our conversations, but this is what I feel when you say, how can sex be sacred? Or Roger's like, talking about this. It's the most sacred space I've ever been in. But these are some of the ways that I approach it and some of my beliefs. So I just wanted to share. And I'm giving you permission to keep talking as long as you want.
Yeah, Angel, I'll just say one thing. If next week you're having Shelby and Kathy come in, they're going to talk about the real interesting stuff that goes on. And they have the vocabulary for it. I'm not even going to go there.
Oh,
I
yeah.
just want to say that, yeah, we go through different phases in our lives too. I raised 16 children. 6 of them are my own. And we went through stages as we developed and they developed. And now we don't shame our kids anymore about things that are natural. And that's led to a much healthier lifestyle for all of them, really. And we had to push a lot of dogma out of the way and a lot of the old traditions. But that was the work of the golden souls, I guess. Mission accomplished. I'm done.
Thank you so much. It's so inspiring. It's so inspiring to witness people in their evolution, and then also families, and how we can pass a better generation on, right? Like we can pass a better culture on to the next generation. And Angel, all of your examples are brilliant, absolutely brilliant, and exactly what I'm talking about. It's the how, and why I'm emphasizing so much about solo sex, because it's the place that is so deeply shameful, that we get confronted with our condition. We get to confront our belief system and transmute it and change it through a corrective experience in the body, because change happens in and through the body. Truth lives in and through the body. If anything doesn't resonate with truth, it's going to manifest in through the body. And the other thing I want to add, just as a tool, it relates to sexual shadow, it relates to alchemy, it relates to solo sex, it relates to all of these things, is the fantasy, the power of fantasy. When you're examining, like, oh, what are these things that come through and inspire my arousal, inspire my desire? If I don't judge them or shame them, but instead view them as, just like you were saying, like just different foods and different energies to try on, like, what if I could bring innocence to my turn on? What if I could just enjoy the experience of my turn on and allow it to serve me, and remember that life force energy, building on the principles from last meeting, this life force energy is for me to wield and use however I want to use it. So anything that is feeding it and fueling it, I get to be the steward of it. I get to be the one to say, here's what I want to do with it, with this superpower, right? And also I get to create boundaries and intentions around this, within my integrity. And something I made really clear and distinct in my book is the difference between fantasy and desires of what you'd actually want to experience in real life. Because an idea of something can be your super turn on, and then actually doing it is something totally different. And it's okay to explore both, and to really recognize the value of fantasy, especially when it comes to solo sex, and treat that as the same context of what serves the purpose, what serves the intentions of this space. And so for myself, I love that, what is true. And whenever we're kind of up against conditioning, so there's a lot of things that I might encounter of, like, oh, I know this turns me on, but it's something that I traditionally would feel like I need to hide or be ashamed of, or whatever. But if I'm inviting the divine or God or whatever your language is, if I'm inviting that into this space with me, I'm of the belief that all parts of myself are worthy of love. All parts of myself are divine. All parts of myself are innocent and purposeful. And so if I can approach it with that philosophy, with that perspective in mind, it's an invitation. I can invite any of my fantasies that want to come in and play, and I can practice radical acceptance within myself of that part. Okay, that part's showing up and it wants to play. What is the gift in integrating it? What is the gift in bringing radical acceptance and complete unconditional love in and through the divine to this part of myself? What is the gift? And I have experienced so much love in my own body when I've opened myself up, when I've opened my heart up, when I've opened my body and my yoni up to this energy that flows through me, because I'm allowed. I give myself permission. I give myself permission to feel. I give myself permission to explore, to invite. And honestly, maybe one of the most taboo things of all is not just for God or the divine to be present in that space, but like, what if God is a lover? What if the divine energy, because we'll talk about more erotic blueprints next week with Cami and Shelby, but energetics is a real thing. What kind of energy source am I drawing into my body to charge us, to fuel this arousal, right? Like, I can't think of a more beautiful and worthy and powerful source than the divine. And as a female body, like that, I literally use visualization, I use breath work, and I use movement and sound to interact with it, right? Making love with this energy and allowing it to move through me, and and my pelvic floor muscles, I can flex and draw them in. And so that's an example of co-creation with the divine, with my own inspiration, my own intuition, attuning to my body, bringing the intention like we did with our hand. What if it was, remember when I said, hold yourself, don't just put your hands on your body, hold yourself. How can my hands be a tool to intuitively move and caress and inspire? Right? What if my hands could be moved by the divine on my own body, within my own self? What is possible to discover? And what if the inspiration that comes through, just like we would a vision or channeling messages or whatever, like what if the things that are coming through that inspire me and that light me up, what if that's pure and innocent and good? What if I don't have to assign a story to it? What if it can just be a thing? And for myself, proof is in the pudding. It's an experiment. I let it be messy. And I can just attest that I've never encountered a dark corner, a kinky corner of my mind that has not led me to more love. Because I just claim it as such. Like, I've just decided that that's what's true for me. And when it comes to sacred union, there's so much more we could go into depth with this. I just want to speak to the power of if both partners are doing this work within themselves and integrating and embracing all of those kinky shadows, and then bringing it into this space and saying, you know, I've learned to accept and love this part, and I've built trust and safety with this part of myself, and it can come through without me worrying that it's going to harm you, because I have me and I have you. What's possible to co-create together? I've had seriously, like, one single encounter. I've got to play the role of submissive receiver and sex priestess goddess that's super powerful and playful mermaid, and you know, like I get to move through these different things, and it's such a co-creation, it's such a playground. It's so fun. And it's all love. Thank you, Andrea. So much love. It's all love. And so I want to recap with some takeaways for today. To look at any dimension of your sexuality that is crunchy or that is difficult to engage with an open heart and curiosity. Invite the divine into that place. And recognize that nothing is ever black and white. Even the things that we feel the most ashamed of and want to just condemn as bad, see if you can find the nuances, see if you can find the gray area, like, in what way is this maybe serving me? In what way does this maybe offer a gift to the fullness of my expression, to the multidimensionality of my expression? In what way can this serve me? And then in what ways is it not serving me? Because sometimes with sexual shadow, the way we discover them is creating harm. I do want to share this story, actually. And I know I talked about takeaways, but this is an important story. One of my own sexual shadows that showed up in the past was rebellion. I wanted to break rules, and it was really sexy to kind of play in the taboo. I was super turned on by taboo. And it came from a lot of my really rigid upbringing and, you know, dogmatic cultural shame, you know, sexual shaming context. But I just wanted to break the rules. It was so hot and sexy to me. But when I wasn't accepting that part of myself, and I was actually trying to fight that part of myself and resist that part of myself, I was trying to shut it down. It showed up in impulsive, spontaneous ways that would almost be like this compartmentalized state, where I would reach this like fuck it state, and then it would like act out almost. But now that I've learned to, and when it would act out like that, it sometimes wouldn't be within my integrity. Like it would be in ways that would cause harm to myself, like a self-sabotage pattern, or it would unintentionally cause harm to somebody that I cared about because it was, again, kind of acting out impulsively and unconsciously. But when I brought awareness to it, and when I recognized the ways that it was acting and not in a way that wasn't serving me, but that inherently it's not bad. It's not bad to have a part that wants to be rebellious. It's not bad. Like that was helping me to find a sense of freedom. That was helping me to find a sense of autonomy and self-expression and power when I was feeling so disempowered. So it was serving a beautiful purpose. It was just acting out in a way that wasn't serving me. Does that make sense? Is that clear? And so now when I brought awareness to that part of myself, I get to play with it. I get to love it and embrace it and be grateful for it. Like, thank you so much. Like, this is so fun. Because now I get to actually consciously choose which rules do I want to break and which rules are absolutely unacceptable to break because it would require betraying my own integrity. I'm unwilling to let that part of myself cause harm to my own good or somebody that I love. I'm not willing to let it act out in that way. And the way that I help it not do that is by embracing it and saying, how can I play with this in a way that does serve me? Any questions about that principle? Okay. So other takeaways, the necessary components, remember safety, love, and trust, presence, the power of presence. If at any point, either of you, if you're attuned to the energy of it, like, are we in connection? Is my partner fully present? You'll get into the practice. You'll start to feel if they're really there with you. You'll start to read if you're fully present and paying attention, one eye inward, one eye outward, you're going to notice shifts in their body. You're going to notice if they go rigid and start to go into a free state, or you'll notice if like, hey, is something off? You'll start to develop that language, that unspoken language. If at any point either of you feels like something's been disrupted in the container, it's both of your responsibility to call for a pause or a timeout, whoever has the awareness, right? To just pause and check in. Communication is so key. Boundaries and consent are absolutely essential. If I have me and I have you, it's my responsibility to make sure that I'm only consenting to things that are actually a full body yes for me. That keeps us both safe. And if I feel like there's any hesitation, or I feel like it's not a full yes, I feel like it might be a people-pleasing pattern, it's my job to check in and be like, hey, just to establish this trust and to maintain this safety, is this a full body fuck yes for you? Or is there any kind of obligation or pressure or people pleasing happening, right? It's both people that are co-creating this. Feeling your emotions fully. This goes for both partners on both sides, embracing and welcoming any emotional expression to come through, because what we're doing is somatic healing work. It's some of the most beautiful, energetic, and embodiment healing practice out there. It incorporates movement, incorporates sound, incorporates breath, it incorporates manifestation and visualization and energetics at higher frequency states. Like, it's some of the most powerful work that we can do. And so we have to make it okay to feel and express all emotions. As far as alchemy goes, what the notes that I wrote, can we kiss our scars, embrace our raw spots, ask what they need, and make love to our painful places? And I want to give the phrase slow is fast. Because when we can slow down and tune to the moment, that is the most efficient way forward. That is the most efficient way to greater depth, is when we can slow down and enjoy it. Even if we only have 15 minutes, create the illusion for me that we have all the time in the world, that we're going to make the most of every single one of those moments. Because anybody that's ever done a meditation or anybody that's ever done an eye gazing practice, 60 seconds is a long ass time. Right? Especially if you're new to that practice. It's like, oh, 1 minute is a long time to be fully present here, gazing into your eyeballs that I'm not used to doing. It's super vulnerable. So just recognize how much you can expand time by being fully present in it and slowing down to notice all of it. Feel it with your whole body, all of your senses. If the goal is intimacy, go at that pace. Go at the pace of intimacy. And then a few things for secure attachment. I just want to give this formula because I can't go into depth about it this evening, but there is a secure sexual attachment that can be achieved in the same way that emotional security can be achieved in relationship. And the formula is risk, reach, respond. With consistency, that builds trust, that builds security, that builds reliability, that builds safety. I can risk to be vulnerable. I can share a part of myself. I can reach for connection or support, and I can trust that I'm going to get a response that's affirming and loving and supportive, and right, like I'm going to get that consistently, not perfectly, not every time. We're going to drop the ball all the times. We're humans. We're going to miss cues all the time. When we do, let's revisit it. Let's try it again. Let's repair, but risk, reach, and respond. And then this last piece I want to share, just as a final takeaway, we've been talking about it, but there's a book that I really appreciate. It's called Magnificent Sex. It's Lessons from Extraordinary Lovers. I can maybe put a link in the book or a link in the replay or something we can send out. But the book's called Magnificent Sex. It's pretty data driven. Okay, it's my turn. Perfect. It's pretty data driven, but I sometimes love when data just validates our human experience of things that we can kind of organically and intuitively discover within ourselves. And for the left brain, logical kinds of thinkers, I think it's just so helpful to put it into context of like why all these things are valuable. So from the data they collected from a qualitative study, kind of meta-analysis of different people and their expressions or stories of the extraordinary sex that they're having, they came up with 8 components of what constitute extraordinary sex. And so I just want to read them to you. The first one is being fully present, embodied, focused, and absorbed in the moment. Having connection, alignment, being in sync, and creating a merger. Having deep sexual and erotic intimacy. Having extraordinary communication and deep empathy. Being genuine, authentic, and transparent with each other. Having vulnerability and surrender. And having exploration, interpersonal risk-taking, and fun. And lastly, there being transcendence and transformation. And one takeaway that I love about all these things is the components. All of those components are universal, but the particulars are unique. So my invitation to you is discover those components in your own unique way and celebrate your unique expression and synergy, because each union, each partnership is going to be different. You both bring different energies, you both bring different expressions. You're going to have a different dynamic. It's creation, it's creativity. So each experience, even if it's the same person, even if you have the same relationship, every time you have a sexual encounter can feel different. You can have your favorite positions, you can have your favorite go-tos, you can learn each other's inner landscape. But when you can be fully present and creative in these moments and just like let it move through you, each time can be a unique expression. You can discover new dimensions of yourself each time. And in that way, I don't think monogamy can get boring. I think it's like, it can be so wildly fun, because the more security, the more safety, the more trust, the more intimacy that you can cultivate, the more expansion, exploration, discovery that are available to you. And then one other piece, just anybody that might be struggling with like low desire or not being able to access it, like, it also comes from this book, but it was so profound to me that some people will say, I could be totally fine never having sex again, right? I just don't even want sex again. But think about the type of sex you've been having, or think about the type of sex that's been available to you or that's been taught to you. And if it is uninspiring, undesirable sex, I don't blame you. But consider, what type of sex would you desire? What type of sex would feel inspiring? And start with you. That feels like a good place to pause.
A whole new world. Thank you, Julie, for bringing us into your amazing world.
Thank you.
Julie, I believe you've done a lot of work on your belief system coming out of a purity culture to be able to explore, educate, and then even publicly talk about these things. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you for opening a door and a portal for people to heal. Who would like to comment? It would be nice if you would share anything that you thought or that inspired you tonight to give Julie a little feedback on her time that she's given us. Well, nobody hung up, so I guess they found value somewhere. Or even a thought that came to you, anybody.
Tonight, you had yourself unmuted. Did you have something you want to say?
Yep, you're being called out.
Actually, yeah, I've kind of been just thinking about this for a minute and figuring out how I want to say it. My partner and I we started out in a polyamorous dynamic, and then we were separate for a while, and we've just come back together in a really divine union, sexually monogamous, having been separated and done a tremendous amount of work ourselves, and coming back has been really, really powerful to meet each other emotionally, physically, and sexually. And I'm just really taking in all these things that you're saying and just really appreciate you and get to apply these things in my life right now. It's really amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you for sharing, for being here, and for doing the work and practicing them. It takes incredible courage and vulnerability. So I celebrate you for that, especially the path that you just shared of kind of going away and coming back together and new iterations of yourself. I think that's incredibly inspiring. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thank you.
Anyone else?
Maybe we should just keep talking and let them just all be voyeurs, because it seems like that's what they're into, you know? These kinky kids, they're just wanting to hear us talk about sex and they don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
I do want to share my screen here. Let's see if I get the right screen up. Okay. Come back here.
Angel, I just love your humor that you bring to things. I feel inspired to just share real briefly. That's the playful part. That's the fun part. If you can't laugh during sex, you're doing something wrong. Right? It just brings a levity to it. That's what I meant by sacred. Like, it doesn't have to be so serious. And I so appreciate that about you. Sometimes I get so passionate and I'll talk about all of the depth. I love depth. I'm like such a sensual being that I'm just like, I could drink it in all day. But when I can fully open and fully release, like, all I want to do is giggle during sex. And you're just fantastic about inviting that. So thank you for that gift.
You're welcome. So again, I'll put this link in the chat, but to get ready for next week, when we're going to have Cami and Shelby on, I call them the unicorns, and they're fantastic mentors around banishing the shame around sex and educating and answering questions. So this page that I'll put in the link is put in the chat, is a place for you to scroll down and take this quiz by just putting in your info. Once the quiz is complete, you'll see a final page with your main erotic blueprint type. We want you to write that down It's very important. It says scroll down and take a screenshot of this, of your percentages. You won't get it again. Now, I'm hoping this is the free one. If not, we'll have to search the internet, or for sure next week we'll have it on there. Because since this became popular, there it is in the chat. There's paid versions, of course, but when I was first shared this by the unicorns, it was free, and it gives you your main sexual blueprint. It's like a personality test, and then it will give you percentages and list the other categories and say how much you're in there, those categories. Now, what we're going to do is go over them and go into depth about what it means, but it's like taking a personality test. And when you've ever done that with a partner and you just start to realize how, oh, the way you define fun is so different and your likes and dislikes are so different, we stop judging our partners by our standards and likes and preferences. Like, I'm not going to argue with my partner because his favorite food is Mexican and I prefer Italian. Every time we go to dinner, there doesn't have to be an argument. There's so many ways to meet each other in the middle for me to be willing to try and explore. Like, maybe the last time I had Mexican food, it was bad, but what if I try it again? What if I try it tonight? What if we had some Mexican and some Italian? Like, putting this into sexual context, you can stop judging your partner. And one of the categories, I'm not even going to say actually, but I'm going to wait till next week. Take this honestly. Just take it honestly. Don't try to make your answers sound right, or don't be afraid of how it's going to turn out. But next week, it'll be amazing to go into more depth on that and help gives you permission. So when I got my first test back, it was like, oh, I have permission to be this. So it will help illuminate maybe some sexual shadows, because who and what you desire will come out in this test, and you'll be able to acknowledge it. And just like, this is just me. It's like me, like Angel. I was born left-handed. I'm left-handed. Like, it's just natural, I like this. This is my preference. So I'm so excited about that. And then we have booked Brianna Anderson for the next week. She is a master at human design and gene keys. She's a master, and she's going to allow us to, on the spot, we can share our profiles with her. We'll set you up if you're in the class. Don't worry. We'll get that all taken care of. But spot on, she'll be able to look at your profiles and in real time tell you your sexual and creative blocks based on human design and gene keys. And that's on March 25th. So we have a lot of fun coming up in the next few weeks. And we just want to thank you for being here. And Julie, thank you again.
Yes, thank you. If I can speak one thing to the erotic blueprints, I always like to describe them as sexual love languages, right?
Okay.
If anybody's heard of love languages, physical touch, words of affirmation, et cetera, we all love love. We all love to receive all of it. It's just good to know what your primary are so that your deepest desires, your deepest yearnings can feel seen and celebrated and met. And then you can embrace and celebrate all of the different expressions of sexual love languages. So I just think that sometimes that's a helpful comparison.
Perfect. Thank you all for being here tonight.
Thank you, everyone.